seven countries. Right now, as you watch this, seven countries are in the process of collapse, not metaphorical collapse, not the kind of slow decay that economists call structural adjustment. I mean real civilizational unraveling. And the first one on this list is going to shock you because it is not a war zone, it is not a sanctioned state. It is a place the Western media has been calling for the past decade a success story. Let me take you back. Let me show you what was visible to anyone paying attention, not to the headline, not to the press releases from Washington and Brussels, but to the underlying architecture of power, that dependency and demographic fragility that holds or breaks a modern state. But before we dive deep into the analysis, just subscribe this channel and do not forget to hit the like button to help me a little. Yes, the patterns were there. They are always there. The question is whether you are trained to see them. We live an era of spectacular distraction. Every week brings a new crisis, a new outrage, a new villain for the algorithm to amplify, and whole world is looking at the spectacle. The real collapses, the slow motion tectonic shift that reshape the international order for generations. These happen quietly, almost invisibly, until suddenly they happen all at once, and everyone looks up from their phones and then asks, how did this happen? So fast. It didn't happen fast. It didn't happen fast. That is the first thing you need to understand. What looks like sudden collapse is always the last chapter of a very long book. Every empire, every state, every system that has ever failed gave decades of warning signals before the final rupture. The problem is that the most people are not reading the book. They are watching a highlight reel, and highlight reel don't show you the rot in the foundation. So let's talk about the first country, and yes, it will surprise you. France, not Syria, not Venezuela, not some African nation. The Western commentariat already wrote off France, the fifth largest economy in the world, a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, a nuclear armed state, a founding member of the European Union. France is entering a phase of political and social decomposition that by any serious historical metric qualifies as pre-collapse. And the reason nobody wants to say this out loud is that saying it out loud violates the foundational mythology of the liberal international order. The idea that advanced Western democracies are, by definition, immune to the forces that bring down lesser states. They are not immune. They never were. And France is the proof. Look at what happened in France over the past 8 years. 3 consecutive governments unable to complete their mandate without emergency power. A pension reform that triggered the largest sustained street mobilization since 1960, not for weeks but for months. Not for weeks but for months. And agricultural sector is your open revolt. A police force that has in certain suburban territory effectively ceded a operational control to parallel power structure. A bond market that is quietly, politely, but unmistakably beginning to price political risk and wage it has not done since 1990, and an electoral landscape so fragmented that the concept of a governing majority has become nearly theoretical. There is no secret. None of this is secret. All of it is publicly available data. But because France is France, because it carries the symbolic weight of the enlightenment, of liberty, fraternity, of everything the Western order tells itself It represents the analytical class, refuses to apply to France. The some diagnostic framework it would immediately apply to, say, Pakistan or Peru. That double standard is not just intellectually dishonest, it is dangerous because it means the warning signs go without read. The warning signs go unread until it is too late to course correct. Now let us move to the second color because it is in a different way, even more instructive. Ethiopia. Here is a country that as recently as 2019 was receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. Its Prime Minister was celebrated across the international media as a transformational leader, a visionary, a man who had ended a decade-long conflict with a neighboring state and was ushering his country into a new era of democratic openness. The international investment community was excited. The development agencies were optimistic. The narrative was irresistible. 2 years later, one of the worst civil wars of the 21st century was consuming the country's northern region. Atrocities were being committed on a scale that the United Nations, using its characteristic euphemism, described as among the most horrific in the world. Hundreds of thousands were dead. Millions were displaced. The Nobel laureate was directing a military campaign that independent investigators were documenting with the language of war crimes. What happened? Nothing happened that wasn't already visible in 2019. To anyone who looked past the Nobel narrative, Ethiopia is a federation of deeply distinct ethnic, linguistic, and regional communities, held together not by genuine civic integration, but by elite bargain and historically by authoritarian force. When the force was relaxed, liberalization that earned the Nobel Prize loosened the mechanism of central control. The underlying centrifugal forces didn't disappear, they accelerated because they had never been resolved, they had only been suppressed. The lesson of Ethiopia is the lesson of every federal state that has tried to manage ethnic pluralism through top-down political theatre rather than genuine structural accommodation. It is the lesson of Yugoslavia. It is the lesson of Soviet Union. It is the lesson of that political scientists have been writing about since the 1990s. And yet every generation, the international community rediscovers it with fresh shock as though it has never happened before. Pakistan is the third country on this list and have the collapse, and the collapse is unfolding in slow motion across three simultaneous axes: fiscal, military, and political legitimacy. The fiscal situation is not a crisis that can be resolved by the next IMF program. Pakistan has been in and out of IMF program for 70 years. This is not a temporary liquidity problem. This is a structural condition in which the state cannot generate sufficient revenue to fund basic functions because the elite that controls the state has successfully exempted itself from taxation for generations. The fourth country is one that the world has been watching for 2 years but consistently misunderstanding: Ukraine. Not because Ukraine is losing the military picture, remain genuinely contested and is not my subject here. Ukraine is collapsing in a different and more fundamental sense, demographically and institutionally. The demographic losses from this war, killed, wounded, displaced abroad, internally displaced, represent a generational hemorrhage from which no reconstruction plan, however generously funded, can simply recover by writing checks. A country is not its GDP. A country is its people, their relationship, their institutional memory, their capacity to reproduce social trust across generations. The reconstruction of Ukraine, when it eventually happens, will face a paradox that the architect of the Marshall Plan never had to confront. The thing you are trying to rebuild, the human substrate of a functioning society, has been scattered across 30 countries and will not simply return because the shooting stops. The people who have rebuilt their lives in Germany, Poland, and Canada do not come home because a peace agreement is signed. They come home. If they come home slowly, selectively, and only if the conditions they return to are meaningfully better than the conditions they left. Creating those conditions require exactly the human capital that has immigrated. This is the trap, and very few people in the room where reconstruction is being planned are talking honestly about it. The 5th, 6th, and 7th collapses are geographically diverse but analytically connected by a single thread, the end of the commodity supercycle that sustained them and the absence of any alternative economic foundation built during the years of abundance. Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa, the largest economy in the continent, a country that for 20 years was the investment bankers' favorite African growth story. Nigeria is now in the middle of a currency crisis, a fuel subsidy collapse, a security fragmentation across multiple regions, and a political class so thoroughly captured by oil rent that it has no institutional memory of how to govern a post-oil economy because it has never had to. The oil is not gone, but the oil is no longer sufficient, and a state that was built entirely around the distribution of oil revenue has no architecture or anything else. Argentina again, the country that has defaulted on its sovereign debt more times than any other in modern history, and that is, as of this moment, engaged in its most radical experiment yet, a deliberate ideologically driven demolition of the state apparatus that, whatever its theoretical merits, is producing social dislocation that the Argentina political system, historically volatile, may not be able to absorb. This is not a prediction. This is a description of what is happening in real time. And Bangladesh, a country that the development community used of the past 30 years, genuine poverty reduction, genuine improvement in maternal health and female education, a garment sector that lifted millions into the formal economy. Bangladesh is now navigating a post-autocratic transition after the fall of 15-year government, with an economy that is more fragile than the headline number suggest, a garment sector facing structural pressure from automation and nearshoring, and a political culture that has never successfully managed a peaceful transfer of power between rival factions. What connects all seven of these? What is the thread? It is this: every single one of these states was built on a foundation that was always temporary, a commodity boom, an authoritarian bargain, a geopolitical subsidy, a development narrative that papered over structural weaknesses, and every single one of them failed to use the window of apparent stability to build the institutional, a commodity boom, an authoritarian bargain, a geopolitical subsidy, a development narrative that papered over structural weaknesses, and every single one of them failed to use the window of apparent stability to build the institution, the civic culture, the diversified economy, the genuine social contracts that would have made them resilient when the temporary foundation shifted. The window always closes. The community boom ends. Thank you.